Hello and welcome to another episode of the Half Court Press podcast, the Omaha World-Herald. I'm Wilson Moore, joined as always by Jon Walker. Jon, it's been a little bit since we've done this. I think we last did this on a Tuesday. It's now Thursday, if my sense of day and time hasn't been completely warped by the past week or so by overtime games and deadlines and everything that comes with it. But
Yeah, man.
pretty eventful past week and a half for the two Division One, or I guess UNO too, but two of the college basketball teams in the state of Nebraska,
Yeah, it's been, would you say interesting?
to say the
That
least. Yeah,
yeah, that's one way to put it. There are quite a few other adjectives, you could use for sure. I think Wilson and I were just what we've had four games between Nebraska and Creighton over the past few weeks. And it's been like four losses or something like that. Four or five losses, I think is what it is. So brutal hoops going on in the state right
yeah.
now.
And how many overtime games? Nebraska had two. Did Creighton have one or
Nebraska had
two?
two. Creighton had one, and another that took 27 minutes to play the final 49 seconds. So, it was for whatever that's worth. It was one of those. So not quite overtime, but you might as well have just played another five. Um, so yeah, tight deadlines, good hoops, and quite a few losses around this neck of the woods.
Yeah. Well,
What when so recap me with Nebraska because it's been an interesting couple of weeks for them. Have the blowout loss at Maryland in a game that, we kind of thought when you looked at that next four-game stretch, they probably needed to have. And
yeah.
then, oh, they don't, they get clobbered at Maryland, and boom, they have a pretty resounding response the next time out against Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, it's been the story of this team's season, hasn't it? It's a ugly, ugly loss on the road. That I think I would argue that Maryland game is the worst Nebraska has played this season. I think that was their worst 40 minutes of basketball that we've seen this year.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and then comes back, gets down 19 early to Wisconsin. It's 15 or 16 at halftime, and flips the switch. CJ Wilcher caught fire. It was kind of like the Purdue game for me, in that there are a million just little little moments that stand out in my mind.
Yeah,
Rink Mast hitting a step back three pointer to tie it with about a minute left. Just man, this feels like a million years ago as I'm talking about it now. It was a
yeah,
week ago today. Yeah. And
that's nuts.
but yeah, just I mean, I think I've said this maybe even on this podcast before, but the further into this season we get, the less I know and understand about
Yeah,
the University of Nebraska men's basketball team. I mean, they just that was I mean, and frankly that you can say that about college basketball as a whole. Nothing ever makes sense in this sport, but just a crazy win over Wisconsin. A really one they really needed because uh, a week ago on the pod I said Nebraska 2-2 in that 4 game stretch that we'll get to the next few games in a bit, but 2-2 would put them in a really nice spot. Looking ahead to the tournament. And Nebraska didn't go 2-2. Nebraska went 1-3, which is not the worst thing in the world, especially when you consider, the quality of the opponents. They were on the road, and how much 0-4 would have been on the table.
yeah,
Um, the schedule lightens up significantly for Nebraska at this point. They've got Michigan at home, followed by a week off, which I think is badly needed given how just uh, gassed they looked at Northwestern last night, and then Penn State at home. And Nebraska still kind of controls its own destiny to make the NCAA tournament. And but to do that over the next 2 weeks, they got to be Bachman Turner overdrive. Got taking care of business. Um that's where they stand now. We can get to the last two of that brutal 4 game stretch on a bit, but John Creighton also had a pretty weird, strange week. I just used two of the same word there, but whatever. Well,
That's okay. Yeah,
yeah,
I think yeah, you had one for each game, which
yeah,
is
yeah.
is accurate because yeah, it's this Creighton has been an entirely different team than it was in the month of January, and it hasn't worked. We went through January seeing this team grind it out against Providence, against St. John's, in a triple overtime win at Seton Hall. They relied on their defense, which was, metrically one of the best in the country, and they got just enough scoring from the big three. And we just kept saying, man, if they can get back on track offensively, this is a team that held UConn to 62 points in stores and still lost by 14. Like that game was a perfect encapsulation of their month of January, I think. They have now scored 85 plus in 5 straight games, including the last two but they've given up 90 plus in the past two. And that's the crazy thing. Gave up 99 in a 1 point loss to Butler last Friday, and gave up, what was it, 90? It was 91-87 last night in Rhode Island for the rematch with Providence. So this team that was such a defensive juggernaut has all of a sudden let teams score amok, essentially. Now, last Friday against Butler, that was just, I mean, that I don't know if, like, Butler could have played anybody that night and they were not going to miss shots, is what it felt like. And Greg McDermott had even said after that game, you look at the stat sheet, like, offensively, we played well enough to win. And so that's the tough part, is that they figured things out offensively. That's been on display last Friday, really over the past 5 games again, but last Friday, especially when they put up 98, and then they had kind of scored at will again last night at the AMP, and again still fell up short in overtime. So it's been a sticky situation. I can't say they're looking forward to rest, because that they had 6 days of rest before the Butler game, and now this is kind of where they stand. And it isn't done, because they get Xavier on Saturday, and what will be, another one of those kind of Big East bubble teams, just absolutely fighting for its life. And what a better way to do that than pick up a win over the number 19 team in the country. So, Xavier is going to be jacked. Providence was jacked last night, obviously. That's kind of the gauntlet that Creighton is trying to get through right now. But the Jays got to get back on track, man. First back-to-back losses since they opened conference play with 2 in a row.
Yeah.
So
Now, I haven't watched a whole lot of Creighton recently because they seem to always play on the same night as Nebraska.
yeah.
But
I usually assume, like like last night, I knew that I was like halfway through the first half, and I was like, all right, where's Wilson Streets that Nebraska is playing? I was just like, I just assume at this point.
yeah, but I did watch that Butler game, and it seemed to me, and I think McDermott said something to this extent after the game, and you wrote about it, that and I'm paraphrasing here, that's kind of the tone of a game that should favor Creighton, right? That Creighton says, okay, we're going to turn this into a sprint.
Yep.
We're going to, get back and forth, make shots, and if the other team can keep pace and can make more 3 pointers, then you tip your cap to them.
That's kind of what this team made a killing off of throughout the non-con. And then, you run into the Big East. It's a little bit different style of basketball. They know you. I use downside very, very loosely here. That's the downside of having a coach long term in a program is you get a feel for his tendencies, right? Like that's just kind of how it is. Um, and so it was always going to be different, or we thought it could be different. And the Big East has proven that yeah, Creighton, you are not going to get a bunch of open looks from three. And we're not just going to let you pick and roll us to death with Ryan Kalkbrenner. And so teams have kind of worked around that basis. I really think it was a foundation laid by like Colorado State and UNLV back in the non-con, really. And Big East teams have kind of taken that and molded it to whatever fits their, strategy on that night. Um, and it's worked, man. Because yeah, exactly right. You would think, if you told me 2 months ago that Creighton was going to get in a track meet in every Big East basketball game, I'd say the Jays were atop the league and undefeated right now. Because that's just the team they were through the first 2 months of the season. And then that strategy, that recipe has kind of all come unraveled at this point. And that's the sickening thing is that it looks like they've gotten back to being able to win and wanting to be in a track meet. And now the defense has just plummeted. Teams have hit tough shots. That was the case with Butler. I mean, and Providence did the same thing. But I think Stephen Ashworth had said, before they hit the road and after the Butler game, that we just had a few defensive laps. Like we were resting, we were relaxing a bit too much. Those positions are the difference in these two losses.
Yeah. I'll move on back to Nebraska.
Yeah, because it's crazy what these two teams are doing right now at the same time because it just feels too right. And it feels like this is a real turning point for both teams. Beginning of February, we're approaching the middle of February. We've got a little over a month to Selection Sunday, 5 weeks, I think it is. Big point midway through the conference schedule for both of these teams. And Creighton has struggled. Nebraska has struggled as well.
Yeah. To Nebraska's credit, the Huskers played probably, I'm not even going to say probably, the Huskers played their best road game of the conference season at Illinois. They hung tough with a really good Illinois team.
Yeah.
They Illinois was more impressive in person than I had realized. I've
Because you win. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That was yeah, man. Even by Big Ten standards, that is a nondescript drive through basically all of Iowa and then into Southern Illinois. Like that, there's nothing out the window there. But
Yeah.
um, no, I mean, Coleman Hawkins has been in this league for a while now, and this is the first time I've really realized what a just matchup nightmare he's turned into as a long, athletic guy who can put it on the floor, but also knock down jump shots. But Nebraska hung tough. That was a hard game, a game that could have easily gotten out of hand quickly, like so many other road games have. Where we've seen it so many times this season where the other team goes on a run and goes up 10, and then 3 minutes later that 10-point lead is up to 20.
Yeah.
And yeah, home crowd behind them. That's it. Nebraska didn't let that happen. They ended the game on ended regulation on an 11-1 run. Came within about 5 seconds of winning, which, if Nebraska doesn't take care of business down the stretch here and misses the tournament, like those 5 seconds in Champaign,
Yeah.
Illinois are going to keep Fred Hoiberg up at night. Like that,
Yeah.
when you think about a team that so badly needs a good win away from Pinnacle Bank Arena, and got that close to it again. It would have been a quad one, another top 15 win. Just how huge that would have been. But Marcus Damask got fouled, hit a free throw, sent into overtime, and Nebraska was just out of gas by then.
Yeah.
It reminded me of like the movie Rocky. They're into the 12th round, and Rocky has just taken an absolute beating from Apollo Creed, R.I.P. Carl Weathers. Uh, Rocky has just taken an absolute beating, and he's somehow still like standing and still staying in the ring. That was Nebraska against Illinois. Illinois had the size advantage. Illinois was bigger and
Yeah.
stronger. They got to every rebound. That was like just, they were getting, it felt like Illinois was getting two, three chances every time down the court. And Nebraska just absorbed every shot, hung in the best it could. Keisei Tominaga had his best game in a few weeks. He heated up. It just didn't, but Illinois just had a little too much juice, a little too much firepower.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking as I was following along with that game. That would be the one to keep Fred Hoiberg up at night. Thankfully for them, no team is good on the road this year.
Yeah.
Like every team is. I was looking at it the other day because I wrote my preview for this week over that for Creighton since they have the road trip. I think the best road team in the country is uh, I think the best road country is like 6-2 on the road. Like not not overwhelmingly good, like not unbeatable. Um, which, that's kind of college basketball this year.
Yeah.
But that would have been massive. I think if they would have if they had wins over Purdue and Wisconsin at home, they had a win at Illinois, think you're probably good, barring
Yeah.
a collapse down the stretch of the season. Um, I think you're probably good. Not many teams would walk into Selection Sunday and say, "Hey, here are these three wins," and
Yeah.
yeah, just not a lot of teams would. Um, that's the tough one. But again, you can kind of live with it. The fact that it's on the road and there's still a lot of basketball left to
Yeah.
play. So we'll just kind of see how they have to take care of home court at this
Yeah.
point. There's like not really an option
Yeah.
with how they've played there, how they've played on the road. It feels like you can only afford. I don't know how many more home games they have, but it can't be many. 4, 5
Four. Yeah.
max. Yeah,
Four.
you have to win all of those.
Yeah.
Um, have to, especially since you've already beaten Purdue and Wisconsin at home.
Yeah.
It feels like at least in the Big Ten, there isn't a team that the Huskers shouldn't be able to beat in Lincoln.
No. And those four games, if I'm not mistaken, are uh Michigan, Penn State, Minnesota, and Rutgers. Those are all
So
four very winnable games. I mean,
yeah,
Michigan just beat Wisconsin. I mean, weird things happen.
yeah,
But with the way Michigan's season has gone and how Nebraska has played at home, they should win that. After that, it's Penn
yeah.
State with a week of rest, and then Minnesota and Rutgers are both teams that Nebraska had double-digit leads on away from home. So you got to figure, playing the home court that favors them. It's a light end to the end
Yeah.
of the season for Nebraska because the away games are Ohio State, Michigan, and Indiana. Which I mean, look,
Okay.
that's nothing is a given in the Big Ten, but those are given. Considering what Nebraska's done this year, those are 7 winnable games to
Yeah.
end the season,
Yeah.
and and those are so crucial because Nebraska has done enough that it's put itself in position that if it takes care of business, it's likely a tournament team, but it also hasn't done enough that if if they drop one of those, if they, they're pretty close to being out of winnable games to lose, if that makes sense.
For sure. No, for sure. And I think, that's kind of where Creighton might be a little different because I think every win in the Big East this year is like marquee. I really do. Which I think might hurt the league come Selection Sunday because you're gonna have I don't know, you're gonna have a Providence, a St. John's that finishes above 500 in this league, but because UConn is the only clear cut favorite, maybe the Big East doesn't get the nods on Selection Sunday. I have no clue, but I do know that the stretch doesn't get any easier for Creighton. Um, Again, at Xavier, Georgetown in Omaha next Tuesday. That can be is my cat back there? Maybe. I think I heard him. We'll see if he pops in the back. Or yeah, who knows? But it's not going to get any easier for Creighton. At Xavier Saturday, Georgetown in Omaha on Tuesday, and then at Butler next Saturday. And that's right. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. And then you close the regular season with UConn, St. John, Seton Hall, Marquette, and Villanova.
That's a gauntlet. That is.
Yeah. And so that's why, it kind of feels like these next, three, you have to win. You have to find a way to win at Xavier. They'll beat Georgetown. And if not, then I'll wear a clown nose on next week's episode. And you have to
That was
beat
a
Butler.
nice bet considering the listeners can't see us. That was a good
Yeah.
move.
Yeah, that was good. That was good. And then you have to win at Butler, man. You have to win at Butler. Otherwise, I think you kind of I got a pretty lengthy email last night, post midnight.
That's never good.
Yeah. Nothing with me or the World-Herald, thankfully. But just kind of a longtime Creighton fan expressing how they view the Jays right now, and we're curious how I view the Jays with a month to go in the regular season. He asked me if I thought they were still a tournament team. Yeah, I think Creighton's respected well enough nationally, and I think the Big East is respected enough nationally to where, again, barring a collapse, which who knows, with those 5 games to end the regular season, I guess, if you go 2-3 in those somehow, I don't know. But I think they're still a tournament team at the moment. Now, a week ago, we were thinking they would be a 3 seed. Is that going to happen? No, probably not. Not unless you run the table in those last 5 games and don't lose to Georgetown, But I still think they're a tournament team. I still think Nebraska is a tournament team, to be honest with you. You say 7 left? Yeah, 7 left.
7 left, yeah.
If you get 4 in a win in Minneapolis,
yeah,
you're probably good.
Yeah.
You would think.
I've been and look, I'm not a bracketologist, which, by the way, quick aside, I got to thinking this last night. What do you think Joe Lunardi tells people he does for a living? Like when they ask, do you think he says I'm a bracketologist? Like, and do they know what that means? I had so many questions after seeing a graphic on TV last night. But
or what if Dad, could you come to I don't know, career day?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
for sure. And he steps in the front of the class. He goes,
yeah,
I'm a bracketologist.
Like,
and the kids are
what does his LinkedIn say?
Does he have a LinkedIn? Is that a thing?
I don't know. He's probably too famous and powerful to have a LinkedIn, but anyway,
Yeah, if you search Joe Lunardi LinkedIn, it pops up Joseph Lunardi, the associate vice president of marketing at St. Joseph University.
I don't think that's him.
Nah.
Someday we'll find out. But his last projection from I saw had Nebraska as a 10 seed, 10 or 11, and which I think feels about right
Yeah,
for for right now. And I've been, and my point is, I am not Joe Lunardi. I'm not an expert in those sorts of things, but I have been of the mind that 11 wins in Big Ten uh, probably puts Nebraska in a pretty decent spot, just because they played a very light non-conference schedule. That is a knock
right.
against them. But I think when you have, when you've got two top 10 wins, I think that counteracts that a little bit, just because part of the pitfalls of an easy non-conference schedule is you don't have opportunities to, get those resume building wins, but Nebraska has taken advantage of the opportunities they've had. So I think that balances out a little bit. But yeah, I'm with you. I think, 4 or 5 wins to end the regular season. Yeah, four to end the regular season, and then one in Minneapolis. I think Nebraska's feeling pretty good at that point. I think
Yeah.
with what they've done, they're going to be probably sweating out selection someday, and there are a lot of factors into that, both with a team that probably left a couple wins on the table, and just a fan base that, as I've learned in my first year on this beat, has been conditioned to expect the worst at all times. Um, yeah.
That's brutal. No, I think the same thing. I would like to consider myself a bubble aficionado
Okay, I like it.
because covering Oklahoma State last year, they spent the entire season on the bubble. So we got to the last 2 weeks of the regular season, and it was like, okay, you have to win this game and this game and this game, and you can't lose here. And you got to win two at the Big 12 tournament. And maybe then it's good enough to get in. And they were the first team out of the tournament last year. So I did countless resume comparisons, bubble bursting, bubble blowing, whatever. I'm a bubble aficionado at this point. I,
Then
so I all that to say, I think Nebraska's good with four and a win.
you're covering a good conference for that with what, Butler and Providence, and the Big East is living on
Yeah.
the bubble right now.
Oh my, yeah. You have your, I think your locks at this point are probably going to be UConn, Marquette, Creighton, Seton Hall. I think those are probably fair. Seton Hall had a weak non-con, but they've really, really, really made some noise in the Big East. Um, yeah. Everyone else, aside from DePaul and Georgetown, welcome to life on the bubble for the next month, essentially. Yeah, I don't. And what you've got quite a few of those coming up if you're Creighton, starting with Xavier, obviously, and then yeah, Butler, St. John, Seton Hall, Villanova. Um, they will all be fighting for their tournament life when Creighton gets them for a second time.
Yeah,
So we'll see. So will Creighton maybe.
yeah. Have we discussed the games Nebraska and Creighton played just last night, like 12 hours ago?
Uh, Not in depth.
Yeah, we can fly through those real quick.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Nebraska went in Northwestern, spent a lot of the night looking like the team that had played all of its previous road games outside of Illinois. Hit some shots, hung in there, but I mean they couldn't get stops. Northwestern's offense was really good, just moving the ball, getting open shots. Boo Booey was Boo Booey after he wasn't Boo
He's
Booey the
so
first time
good.
they played. Yeah, like I mean, seeing him in person, he didn't even play very well when they were in Lincoln, but you get a sense of just like how well he uses like a defender's momentum, how good
Yep.
he is at catching a guy just leaning ever so slightly one way and go and driving to the other side. Oh yeah, but Nebraska looked just gassed last night. It's been 4 games in about 12 days. That's a rough stretch, and I think especially two of them going into overtime, just those were mentally, physically taxing games they played against Wisconsin and Illinois. And like I said, when Nebraska looked out of gas in overtime against Illinois, they just looked like the legs just looked like they weren't quite there.
Yeah.
Against a Northwestern team that's really good at home, and you need to, you gotta have everything to beat Northwestern at Welsh Ryan Arena.
Well, how big of, I'll back up a second. Northwestern is another one of these funky teams too.
Yeah,
Beat
they're similar to
Purdue,
Nebraska.
yeah, beat Purdue, lose to Maryland, maybe hanging there with Wisconsin, beat Illinois. Like you never really know what you're getting from Northwestern. How big would last night's win have been? Kind of just like, I guess, in a vacuum. Bubble stuff aside for Nebraska, like would that have been a big win for you in that moment?
It would have been a big win for Nebraska. Just because it's part of the season where you want to just stack wins, and Northwestern's probably a tournament team, and just every quad one, quad two, that would have been quad one last night.
Yeah.
Just win just kind of moves the needle a little more. So yeah, it would have proven Nebraska can win away from Pinnacle Bank Arena, which it has not yet done in conference play. So yeah, it would have been big. It also would have given Nebraska a real inside track on the double bye
Yeah.
for the Big Ten tournament. Purdue, Illinois, and I guess Wisconsin, even after losing three straight, we'll see how they recover. But you figure those are the top three seeds. There's one remaining. Minnesota of all teams currently holds that four seed, which is a little insane.
They probably have the tiebreaker all over like all those middle cluster teams, huh?
Yeah, they just beat Michigan State the other night.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have wins over Michigan State, Northwestern, and Nebraska. Just beat Michigan State, beat
Yeah.
Northwestern in overtime. Yeah, but any of those four teams have are going to have a shot at it over the last couple weeks of the season. A win there would have given Nebraska the series win over Northwestern. They would have been 2-0. So yeah, that last night was big. Still
Yeah.
think it was kind of to a certain extent Nebraska playing with house money, just because again they were not expected to win that game. But it would have been a nice little resume builder if they could have gotten it. But it was just they just uh, Northwestern played too well. Nebraska wasn't at its best.
Yeah. And that's I don't know. That's the tough part for Creighton because they played so well. I guess you could say they weren't at their best, defense considered, but it's such, I don't know. It just feels like a heartbreaker. And I know that gets used to describe losses pretty often, but how they've dropped these last two games, you come up a point shy at Butler and say, man, we should have won. On any other night, we probably would have won. You think, man, okay, we're going to go to Providence. We haven't won there since January 21. Trey Alexander is winless there, to put that in perspective. And so you're thinking, okay, got to have it in the worst of ways. You almost had it on Friday. And here we go. And then they didn't. And I think what shocked me the most was for the first time, probably since UNLV, somebody just really, really, really took it to Ryan Kalkbrenner. And give credit to Josh Oduro, man. It worked well in the first matchup. Friars had just lost Bryce Hopkins. Or Oduro hadn't quite settled into his new role, nor had anybody on Providence. And I think he had like 9 points, 3 boards in the first meeting. He had 32 and 12 last night. I think that you had mentioned the small things that just get lost in these games. It hit me early when Josh Oduro cashed one from like 30 or like 27 feet. And then they pulled Ryan Kalkbrenner out of the paint the next time he popped out. I was like, that's not good for Creighton. Because the whole thing is they're going to run you off the 3-point line, funnel you in, force you to take a mid-range jumper. And if you want to try to drive to the bucket, they've got a 7'1" center who just so happens to be a 2-time defensive player of the year in the Big East. So, it usually works most nights. But Josh Oduro, again, kind of disrupted that early. And then Devin Carter. Might I get scolded for saying very, very, very strong candidate for Big East Player of the Year? Very strong candidate. What he's done to step up with Bryce Hopkins out has just been maniacal. It's been ridiculous. And Creighton kind of got a firsthand account to that last night. He had 28, I think, hit a big, big, big three from Quahog, Rhode Island. You get the reference. Is that a good reference? Family Guy?
Okay, yeah, I
Okay,
it took
okay.
a second for it to hit, but yeah,
okay.
I got it.
I tweeted it last night. Nobody caught it. And I was like, man.
That's
tough.
Disappointing. Disappointingly uncultured from your Twitter followers.
He hit one from the Griffin's residence, and the place went nuts, obviously. And I think that was to force overtime. And then in overtime, he hit another one in the corner over a defender's arm. Like, right, just shots you don't make every day. And that was the type of night it was for Providence. And that was probably the crazy thing, is that the Jays put up 85 plus again, and it wasn't enough. And I think that's kind of been the microcosm of these past two games. Obviously against Butler, it was just tough shot after tough shot, and credit to Butler. But it was how Providence beat the Jays last night. So in such a stark difference from the first matchup, and probably the first time in a long, long time that somebody's taken it right at and had success with taking it right at Ryan Kalkbrenner. And then they knew that Devin Carter was probably going to get going, but then they still weathered that storm until they just kept turning it over. Got out in transition, pick sixes, bang. That's kind of it. Those are the things that kept Providence in it and ahead once Providence got ahead. And then I think we all kind of saw in overtime why it is so hard to win in that environment, because the slightest bucket sent that place ablaze. So yeah, man, I don't know. I do know that the Jays have figured it out on offense at a price for their defense, ? And that's the thing to monitor from them at Xavier. Can this team, after two excruciating losses, one at home, one on the road, can they do the same recipe again? Can you put up 85 plus in Cincinnati? And can, for the first time since, I don't know, I don't count DePaul, if I'm being honest. For the first time since the UConn game, can you play some damn defense? That's really what it boils down to for me. That's what I want to see from Creighton on Saturday.
No, John, that was a great way to kind of send us into the end of this, because that really felt like, can they play some defense? Find out next time on the Half Court Press podcast. If you have not just watched the games or read anything or anything. Yeah. Anyway, this has been the Half Court Press podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.